Okay, so Zechariah 14, last time the title of the message was, yes, Jerusalem, a cup of trembling. And we talked about how the nations will rise, all nations will come against Israel, against Jerusalem, and really against the Lord, ultimately. We've already seen in the prophecies how that Israel is the apple of God's eye, and we've seen that He's not finished with Israel. He's got big plans. And really chapter 14 here is kind of the culmination, the subject of all prophecies. Yet it fell over again. It's good having a little servant over here. Praise the Lord. So, the culmination, this has all been working up to, well, all of prophecy has been working up to this moment. So that's really chapter 14 is a big one. It's a huge one, if you care about prophecy, and you should. In fact, the first verse of Zechariah 14, "Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city." So right off the bat, you have a reference to the time of Jacob's trouble. In fact, the day of the Lord will spark this whole time. And we've mentioned before, the day of the Lord does not refer to 24 hours. It's not going to all happen in 24 hours. It's really a period of time. The first thing that must take place, the first thing that will take place before the day of the Lord, this time period comes into in visibility, into fruition, is the rapture of the church, I believe. Once we are raptured out of here, the day of the Lord begins. You can look around today and know that it's the day of man. And really it's the time when the prince of the power of the air rules. And he uses nations, he uses rulers. And God still is on the throne. That's just sometimes we scratch our heads and we wonder. But the day of the Lord, as you read more about it, it's exciting. Because it's not the day of man. It's so different. It's so much better. It's more holy and righteous and true. God's justice. God's justice, just to give you a glimpse, God's justice says, you chip my right back tooth, maybe the sixth tooth from the back, and you chip it. His justice is that person's tooth will be chipped exactly in the same exact spot, exactly the same tooth, exactly the same amount of chipping. That's how perfect and exact God's judgment is. We know what man's judgment is. We know what man's justice is. You knock out one of my eyes, both yours are coming out. You knock out one of my teeth, all of your teeth are coming out. It's over. In fact, David responded to Nathan and his whole analogy with him and Bathsheba, the guy that had one little lamb. And David said, that man should be killed, should be found. And the law said, no, that's not what you were to do. You're to pay back the lamb and make things right, but you don't kill the guy. But that's a perfect example of man's justice and what we think should happen. You can look at the Supreme Courts and see. Anybody happy with it? Very rarely is anyone satisfied with Supreme Court decisions? And it's true. It's the day of man that we're living in. And we should remind ourselves of that, because you can get depressed, you can look around and get distressed, you can maybe even be tempted to start marching through the streets, joining in with the fight against whatever war, whatever politician, whatever thing might be going on. Listen, this is the day of man. Don't get involved. Don't miss that. Don't start to watch out for that. We fell over again. But the day of the Lord, there's so much you can get into, and I just wrote down a few of these. But I think Joel chapter 1, we weren't there, it wasn't too long ago, we were in Joel. But, and there's many verses that we could turn to, but Joel chapter 1 verse 15 has a good explanation, for there are many. Joel 1:15, you can just jot this down. Alas, for the day of the Lord is at hand, and as a destruction from the Almighty shall it come. In other words, it's going to be a day of gloom and destruction and damage. It's vastly different, and I think it's worth noting, especially for younger, for the first time maybe you're looking at the day of the Lord, what this means. It is not the rapture of the church, but the day of the Lord is very different. Why? Because of that very thing we just read in Joel chapter 1. It's a day of destruction, of darkness. Is the rapture going to be a day of destruction and darkness? No. Oh, happy day. We've been praying for that and doing exercises for that for a long time. And so we can read these, and well, I was just getting started. Joel chapter 2, verse 11. Continuing to talk about this. And the Lord shall utter his voice before his army, for his camp is very great, his army. He is strong, and he executes his word, for the day of the Lord is great and very terrible. Who can abide it? Answer. For one thing, 144,000 Jews can abide it. But the whole idea behind that is there ain't going to be a whole lot of people coming out of this time called the day of the Lord, or the time of Jacob's trouble. There's even a distinction there. The day of the Lord just sparks the time of Jacob's trouble. It does not embody that whole time. But it's a dark day, a gloomy day. Amos chapter 5, verse 11. Not too long ago we were in Amos. Chapter 5, verse 18. Amos 5:18. Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord. Watch out if you're saying, let the day of the Lord come. You know, to what end is it for you? For the day of the Lord is darkness and not light. You think you understand the day of the Lord? Make sure you write these down. Amos 5:18, Joel 1:15, Joel 2:11 we read. Zephaniah, just one book back, right? Couple books, sorry. Haggai, forgot about Haggai. How could I forget about Haggai? Zephaniah 1, verse 15, reminding us the great day of the Lord is near. It is near. This is actually 14. Zephaniah 1, 14 and 15. But the great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hastens greatly. Even the voice of the day of the Lord, the mighty man shall cry there bitterly. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, and a day of clouds and thick darkness. Listen, the day of the Lord is no happy time. In fact, you will be reminded this whole picture in Zechariah 14 of Jesus Christ is not a Sunday school hippie with long hair and flowers handing out to people. No, this is a much different Jesus. We've been talking about this starting the book of Revelation on Tuesday nights with the men's group. This is the biblical Jesus. We get a revelation. By the way, the whole book of Revelation is singular. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. And he ain't walking around patting little children on the head and doing all of the things we learned in Sunday school. That he did at his first coming, yes. But the day of the Lord, that's what encapsulates, it totally has this returning Jesus, the Christ. We just sang about it. Just any day now, he'll be returning. For you, for me, and ultimately, in context here, Israel, Jerusalem. They will actually be made, there's something we kind of always just read over, skim over, and I was reminded of this, but some prophecy simply just describes what is coming. Some prophecy is like that, and it's true, and God uses it. He just simply describes what is coming. This is different. Prophecy describing, and you might make note in verse 2, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem. Not the world leaders at the time will get together and take counsel with one another, and they're going to decide. No, God himself will gather. In another prophecy like this, he almost goes out of his way. He's emphasizing the point that I will cause this to happen. I am going to bring this about. It's not just this nation is going to do this and rise up against this nation and this will happen. That happens in prophecy, but this is very specific. And God is repeating, he's kind of reiterating the fact that I will cause this to happen. It will come to pass, and I will be the one that does it. Another prophecy, he says, I'll put hooks through their jaws and drag them as they did to his people, Israel. Speaking, of course, of the Babylonians and the Assyrians. But God's very specific when it comes to he will cause this to happen. His authority, we're reminded of who's really in charge, who's really on the throne. I love it. So when you're going through these prophecies, keep that in mind. Verse 3, then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of battle. We're going to come back to that verse. I could spend all night in that verse, but I won't. At his feet, it doesn't end there. He will fight as he fought in the day of battle. Verse 4, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and another half of it toward the south. It is going to split in two. And he shall flee to the valley of the mountains, or ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach unto Azel. Yea, ye shall flee like as ye fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And the Lord my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. It doesn't stop there. It shall come to pass in that day that the light shall not be clear nor dark, but it shall be one day which shall be known only to the Lord. That day is only known to the Lord. Not day nor night, but it shall come to pass that at evening time it shall be light. And it shall be in that day that living waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the former sea, and half of them toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter shall it be. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. I've got that one underlined because I always need to come back and check that to make sure it's still there. And the Lord shall be king over all the earth. And I'll repeat, all means all, and that's all ever means. It's true. Over all the earth he will be king. In that day shall there be one Lord, and his name one. I thought his name was Yahweh. I thought his name was Jesus. I thought his name was Father, Abba. The answer to that is yes. All of the above. One and the same. I love it. Well, verse 10, and all the land shall be turned as a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. Basically from all the north of Jerusalem to south of Jerusalem, the whole land. It shall be lifted up and inhabited in her place from Benjamin's gate unto the place of the first gate, unto the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananiel unto the king's wine presses. And men shall dwell in it, and there shall be no more utter destruction, but Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall consume away in their holes. Their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord shall be among them, and they shall lay hold everyone on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor. And Judah also shall fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the heathen round about shall be gathered together, gold, silver, apparel, clothing, in great abundance. And so shall be the plague of the horse and the mule and of the camel and of the ass and of all the beasts that shall be in these tents as this plague. It's the battle of Armageddon. It's when, as it mentions back in verse 3, told you we'd get back to it. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations. Yes, Jesus Christ will stand with a sword drawn in his hand. If you don't believe me, revisit Joshua chapter 5. Actually, ask yourself the questions. Ask your kids. Ask your grandkids. Ask people the question, who won the Battle of Jericho? Who is it that gets credit for winning the Battle of Jericho? Joshua 5, verse 13 through 15 answers that. In Joshua 5, verse 13, Joshua's met with a man with a sword drawn. We learn this is the angel of the Lord, capital A, capital L. The angel of the Lord, the one and only. How do you know that? Because Joshua falls down, begins to worship this angel of the Lord. And the angel doesn't do what other angels do throughout the Bible, because they're smart. They don't allow them, they've seen what happens. That happened one time and he got kicked out of heaven. An angel that demanded to be worshipped. No, angels always said, no, get up, don't worship me, but not this angel with Joshua, Joshua 5. In fact, the angel says, remove your shoes, for the place you stand is holy ground. Reminding Joshua of what Moses heard at a burning bush one day, when again God revealed himself, which the burning bush, man. There's a whole Bible study in that. There's a picture there. I've always been fascinated. It's an acacia bush. The bush with thorns all over it. The thorns there in the desert region. And it's consumed, it's on fire, but it's not consumed. Fire speaks of judgment. The thorns speak of the curse. God's judgment there on a cursed world, and yet it's not consumed. Why? Because of who the burning bush is. Jesus Christ. Taking the fire upon himself, taking the thorns on his brow, yet not consumed. Rather, death is beat. Rather, the judgment that I deserve, the judgment, the wrath, it's been poured out on him. Incredible. So Joshua meets Jesus in Joshua chapter 5. Answer to the question, who won the battle at Jericho? Jesus Christ won it. Interesting that Jesus' name in Hebrew is Joshua. Even more interesting, you could do your own study in your own time and make the parallels between the book of Joshua and the book of Revelation. For instance, just for one kind of cool example, you have 2 spies sent in by Joshua to go and spy out the land. The problem is they didn't spy anything. They ended up witnessing to a harlot named Rahab. You recall 2 witnesses in the book of Revelation? There's all kinds of little things tucked away, treasures tucked away. And Joshua, that's just one. Like I said, there are many parallels between the book of Joshua and the book of Revelation that can be drawn. And it's interesting, too, that, again, there's an Old Testament book called Jesus. And we shouldn't be surprised, that got some real rich stuff in it. Another thing I'll throw out there I was just reminded of is the Battle of Jericho is unique because you do a deep study of it and they violate every command, including keeping the Sabbath day holy, not putting the ark out into battle, not doing this, that, or the other. They violate every rule, every law in the Torah. They violate it. Yet, victory. Interesting. Only the book of Jesus can do that. Only God can get away with that. So, if you're ever arguing with a Jewish friend that doesn't believe in Jesus, point him to those things. Hey, wait a minute. The Sabbath that you keep so holy, it was totally violated. In fact, on the Sabbath day, they marched around that city 7 more times than they would have done the previous days. Did more work, according to them. But that's just always fascinated me, these little treasures that are there. If you look and do a deep diving study into some of these things, you find, wow. I mentioned this morning, we're just scratching the surface of these incredible, deep treasures called the Word of God. The Mount of Olives, it is no mistake, we just talked about it in 2 Samuel 15 this morning. And so if you weren't here this morning, shame on you. I won't do that to you. But you can always see the recording, you always visit yourself. It's interesting because the only time in the Old Testament that the Mount of Olives is referred to is right here in Zechariah, unless you were with us this morning, because there's a Mount Olivet that's the same. And it's when David is fleeing from Absalom, his son, who's trying to take the throne by force. Interesting, David flees and his ascent, I think the way it's worded even in 2 Samuel 15, the same place, but I found out just today, it's the only 2 times in the Old Testament. In all of the Old Testament, that Mount of Olives is even brought up at all. And the Mount of Olives, by the way, is basically an obstacle if you're ever going to try to flee from Jerusalem. It's right in the way. David found that out. He's trying to get away from Jerusalem because Absalom is basically coming with the men, and he wants to protect the city of Jerusalem. He gets out of there. He leaves 10 concubines back at his home. We're going to find out next week. That was interesting, but what we did talk about. Why would he leave 10 concubines behind? Because he knew he was coming back. Not like our greater than David, Jesus, who left you and me, his bride, and he knows he's coming back. But on the run, he finds out the Mount of Olives is right in the way. And for David, he just kind of makes the climb, goes over it. But Jesus Christ, when he comes back, the reason the Mount of Olives is special at all is right here in Zechariah 14. What's going to happen? He'll set his foot. This is the biggest touchdown in all of history. He's going to set his foot down on the Mount of Olives. Makes Neil Armstrong stepping his foot on the moon look like nothing. That's nothing compared to this. Or the greatest touchdown of all time, right? You can make up and think in your mind's eye. This is so much, so vastly greater, so much greater. And when he does, the whole mountain splits in two. Interesting, the Sheraton hotels tried to put a hotel there where the Mount of Olives is, and after doing some exploration, soil research that they need to do before breaking ground and coming and actually building a hotel, which they wanted to do, they found out, no, if we do that, this whole mountain could split in two. And then they did a deeper search and said, yeah, actually, if an earthquake happened at this magnitude, it would totally split down the middle. Imagine that. The Bible is accurate. Once again. I hope another company decides to try and research and see, let's try to put something there. God's got his own plans for that Mount of Olives. It will be split in two, and the Red Sea and the Dead Sea will be filled basically by this living water that will come forth down the middle of the Mount of Olives. You're getting into what we read about in what we've referred to the millennial kingdom, where you have the living water, the river of life that flows, and it feeds and brings life back into the Dead Sea. There's a reason it's called the Dead Sea. Nothing lives in it. Nothing can. One day it will. And that's when Jesus Christ comes back, he's going to make all things right. Everything's going to be right. All the clothes hanging on the hanger in the closet will be hanging the right way. All the toilet paper will be coming over the top, not back the other way. Well, those are all silly things, but that's the whole idea is God will make things right and put things back the way they were meant to be. The year of Jubilee always reminds us of that. When all land will go back to its original owners, when all things will be, debts will be canceled. Why did they do away with the year of Jubilee? They never honored it, did they? Terrible, but amazing. Oh, and this is a fun verse. This is a fun verse. Verse 3. I mentioned we'd get back to it. When did the Lord fight for Israel? When did the Lord fight? Because it says in verse 3, then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. Well, Exodus chapter 14. Exodus 14. I had to do this because this is fun. This is my idea of fun. Anyways, Exodus 14:14. It's an easy one for memory too. Well, I like reading 13 with it. Exodus 14, verse 13. Moses said unto the people, fear not stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. You see them, now you won't. The Lord, verse 14, Exodus 14:14, the Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. In other words, you got nothing to worry about. The Lord will go to war against you. In fact, one page over, if you're with me in Exodus 14, Exodus 15, verse 3, or you could just write down Exodus 15, verse 3. Listen to this. A lot of people have a hard time with this one. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. He is my God. I will prepare him an habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Exodus 15, verse 2 and 3, but mainly verse 3 there. The Lord is a man of war. I thought peace, love. Let's all get along, hold hands, kumbaya. Let's get it so the Lord comes back. All we got to do is make sure people love one another, right? The Lord is a man of war. In fact, fights on behalf, especially of Israel. We've already seen that. You mess with them, you're messing with him. And one of my personal favorites, well, we already looked at Joshua 5, didn't we? We already looked at that, but Numbers, this is just kind of a neat one to jot down. Numbers 21:14. Are you getting all these? Numbers 21, verse 14. This is one book I'm going to find when I get to heaven. Numbers 21, verse 14. Everyone's interested in the book of life and book of, you hear about all these different books. Well, Numbers 21, verse 14. Wherefore it is said in the book of the wars of the Lord, what he did in the Red Sea and in the brooks of Arnon. So there is a book of the wars of the Lord, where he has fought on behalf of Israel, on behalf of Joshua, on behalf of Moses, on behalf of whoever. In fact, it's not too far-fetched to say he's fought on behalf of Pastor Mike. Or you put your name in there. In this book of the wars of the Lord, he goes to battle on your behalf. Just as Moses said earlier in Exodus 15 there, the Lord will fight for you. David understood that, didn't he? He said the battle is the Lord's. He said it to this 9-foot beast standing in front of him. I don't know if I would have had the guts. The battle belongs to the Lord. Do you know that the battle belongs to the Lord? And that he is a Lord that will fight. In fact, he's going to be stained with the blood of those who have shed so much blood. Think of the billions of unborn babies. Think of all of the awful things that have taken place. He will make it right. And it's amazing how the Lord is the perfect warrior. The Lord is the one you want fighting on your behalf. So, that was verse 3, yes. Back to Zechariah 14. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations. And again, he will touch down on the Mount of Olives. In fact, Acts chapter 1 is another one. It's only right that the Lord is going to come back at this place, the Mount of Olives. Because in Acts chapter 1, when he ascends on high, the angel looks at them in Acts 1, I think it's verse... I want to say 11. Acts 1:11. Yeah, which said, the angel says to them, "Ye men of Galilee, why are you standing and gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus which is taken up from you to heaven shall come in like manner as you've seen him go into heaven." He's coming back. And he's going to come and touch down on the Mount of Olives. And the angel's like, "Why are you guys gazing up into heaven? Just keep looking. He's coming back." In like manner, that ascension moment where the Lord ascended on high to his Father's throne. Powerful stuff. But he's coming back, the angel reminds the people. Also something we connected this morning in 2 Samuel 15 with Jesus, because you got to make every study about Jesus. If you haven't already learned that, make sure you learn it. But they begin to reject David as king, just as Israel did to Jesus at his first coming. They began to reject Jesus. "We will not have this man rule over us." Earlier, just like in the story with David that we're seeing on Sunday mornings, they begged him to be their king. Just like Jesus. They actually wanted to make him king by force. And he said, no. He kind of got out of there. There's quite a few times when Jesus just seemed to vanish through the crowd. Somehow he made it out. But they wanted to make him king by force. And they are the same people, just like the parallel cannot be missed. The same people that were all on board and voting for him, if you will. They're now saying, "Crucify him. We will not have this man rule over us. We want," in David's case, "we want his son Absalom instead." In Israel's case, it'll be, "We want Antichrist instead. We want this guy to rule, to reign. He's the people's choice. He's got long flowing hair. He looks real good and sounds real good." In Absalom's case. Okay, I'm getting too much there in between. Okay. Anyways, you can take them too far. I've learned that too. These pictures, but they're there nonetheless. You got to see them when they're there, because it really does make God's word all the more exciting when you see. And I love that it's his timing. It just happened to be, we were in 2 Samuel 15 this morning, and here we are in Zechariah, and I find out this is the only time the Mount of Olives is anywhere in the Old Testament. You get to the New Testament, Jesus hangs out there quite a bit. In fact, the Olivet Discourse, ever wonder where that took place? Yeah, the Mount of Olives. The whole end time scenario where the disciples come to him and say, "What will take place? How are we going to know that it's the end of the world?" Don't you wish you were there? We can be. Read Matthew 24 or 25. In fact, all the Gospels have a brief excerpt of that. Fascinating stuff. In fact, Jesus goes into this stuff that we're talking about here, that Zechariah is prophesying about. Jesus talks about it being a time, we talked about that, didn't we? Why do we call it a great tribulation? Or the great tribulation? Jesus did. That's why we call it that. You want to be Old Testament guys? You call it the time of Jacob's trouble. In fact, I meant to read that earlier. Jeremiah chapter 30, that's where we get the phrase from the Old Testament. In Jeremiah 30, verse 5 through 7. We'll just refresh our minds on this whole thing. Jeremiah 30, verse 5. "For thus saith the Lord, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear and not of peace. Ask ye now, and see whether a man does travail with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins, as a woman is in travail, and all faces are turned into paleness. Alas, for the day is great, so that it's not like any other time. It is even the time of Israel, Jacob's trouble. But he shall be saved out of it. Who shall be saved out of it? Israel, Jacob. And you might just remind yourself, it is not a time of Russia's trouble. It is not a time of China's trouble. It is not a time of Africa's trouble. Not a time of Europe's trouble. Not a time of America's trouble. This is what makes Revelation so exciting. This is what makes this prophecy all the more exciting. It's the time of Jacob's trouble. Jacob's name got changed. I don't know if you knew that. To Israel. Why does God call him Jacob? Because they're acting like Jacob. Not faithful, not walking by the faith, but walking by their flesh. Yet, they're going to come out of this time. And if you wonder about this time, you do your homework assignment, Revelation 5, all the way through 19. Chapters 5 through 19, especially going into chapter 6, all the way through to 19, you have the things that will take place during this time. The time of Israel's trouble. Israel will resurface again. It's going to become all about Israel. All of the world will be, and God is going to do it. We've already established that. God will be the one to turn all of the hearts of the world leaders as one coming against Jerusalem, his anointed, Israel. But this must take place for Jesus to return. This will happen for us, verse 5, back to Zechariah 14:5. The very last phrase there. My God shall come and all the saints with thee. Jude verse 14 reiterates that. Right next to the book of Revelation. Right next to the book of Revelation, you've got Jude. And in verse 14, Enoch, also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these things, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his saints. Speaking of his second coming. See, the first coming, Jesus died and suffered, and there will be what we refer to, 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 16, refers to this rapture. The great snatching, when we will be taken up. When that happens, there's not going to be 10,000 saints with him. See, he will come for you at the rapture. We come with him at his second coming. That's important phraseology, isn't it? He will come for you any moment right now. But we will come with him at what we're reading about here, the second coming. We will be ruling, we will be reigning as a bride right alongside the king, our king. We're going to be the bride of Christ at his side. But the enemies of Jerusalem will initially prevail. And God does this almost on purpose, where it looks like there's no hope. And even those in Israel at the time are going to lose hope. They're going to run for cover. They're going to beg to die. They're going to beg to just be able to escape somehow from all of this. And there has never been a time like this. That's what, I forget which one we just read, but Jeremiah 30. That's what that time of Jacob's trouble, it emphasizes the point. There has never been a time like this in all of history. This is a unique moment. The time of Jacob's trouble, the great tribulation. But just as every Hebrew day, I meant to open up with this because when you're talking about the day of the Lord, sometimes people get confused because it's called the day of the Lord. Again, it's not just one day, but in the Hebrew culture, in the Hebrew mindset, understand their day begins at evening when it's dark. Interesting. The day of the Lord begins in darkness, doesn't it? In fact, Zechariah 14 is a great reminder of this. But I kind of like it because we should start keeping days this way. Because it starts in darkness, but then when does it end? When the sun rises. It's bright. So they go from each day that they go, they start out in darkness, but they end in brightness. Just like Zechariah 14. Let's keep reading, shall we? Let's get to the brightness. I'm tired of this. A lot of gloom, got a lot of doom. Yes, but verse 16, oh, it shall come to pass, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is left after this gruesome, bloody war, but beautiful because Jesus again will be the one fighting. All that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship Jesus, the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them there will be no rain. And if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen, the nations, that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Verse 20, and in that day shall there be upon the bells of the horses holiness unto the Lord. And the pots in the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. Yea, every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts. And all they that sacrifice shall come and take of them and seethe therein. And in that day there shall be no more the Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts. There will be no pagan practice. That's what that refers to. There will be no idols. There will be no more of the stuff that has gone on for so long. This is back in Zechariah's time when he's writing this. And he's going into the millennial kingdom beyond the 7 years of tribulation, which we know will take place, Revelation 6 through 19. We've already referred to that. But this that's being referred to is when Jesus will sit upon the throne of David. And he will rule and reign on this earth. And year after year, we will be celebrating. Worship the Lord. Basically, his way. You don't worship the Lord your way, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. I'm here to remind you. You don't buy a boat and go out on the ocean and say, this is how I worship God. I go out on the ocean and I go fishing. And I can be in touch with God just as much as anybody in a pew on a church on a Sunday. Now, some of that's true. But careful that you're not coming to God on your terms. You can read through, you can do your own studies and find out what happens to people when they try to do that. No reverence, no respect for the office, for the authority that God has set in place. All of the different things you can get into there. But this brings things back full circle from the Old Testament and the whole sacrificial system. And it brings about a great reminding me, it brings me back to every feast you can look at. All of the feasts. And you can see perfectly how Jesus is unleavened bread. Jesus is our Passover. Jesus is the Day of Atonement. He atones for my sins. Jesus is the feast of whatever feast you're talking about until you get to this. What's the Feast of Tabernacles all about? Well, they made booths, tents, basically, commemorating when God kept them in the wilderness, preserved them, rained down manna on them, kept them, preserved them. And yes, Jesus is the bread of life. He's come down from heaven. There's ways in which Jesus has fulfilled even the Feast of Tabernacles, but not completely, not totally. Why? Because there's another desert, another wilderness, time of Jacob's trouble that's coming. But God's going to preserve them. He will preserve you. He already has. He's, in fact, snatched us out of here before any of it came. We're not like Noah in the story, who I think even a better picture is Daniel. Those three Hebrew children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, get put in the fiery furnace, right? And Jesus shows up there in the furnace with them. You and me are not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're called the Hebrew children for a reason. That's the nation of Israel. They're going to go through this heat moment. Question to ask in Daniel, in that story, I think it's chapter 3 or chapter 4. The question to ask when you get through it, the whole chapter there, the whole story is, where's Daniel? And it's exciting, because Daniel's a picture of the church. Not that Daniel is dead or Daniel's vanished off the scene. No, just the Holy Spirit decides to put these things in place perfectly to where, during that time where Nebuchadnezzar demanded that you take his mark, and you're not going to be able to buy or sell, you bow down now, and puts them in the fiery furnace. Seems like the Holy Spirit's painting a picture here, but where's your beloved? That's what God called Daniel, by the way. My beloved. I think the Holy Spirit's trying to tell us something, isn't he? The church is not going to be there in this time of great tribulation. A lot like Enoch. Taken up before Noah gets in that ark. Noah and his family are a picture of the nation Israel, just like those three Hebrew children are a picture. But Enoch, who was taken up, raptured literally, before all of that, is a picture of you and me. As the church, we will not go through this time. But there will be those left of the nations which will come against, or which came against Jerusalem, who will understand. And they're going to go up from year to year in worship along with us. We're going to be keeping this Feast of Tabernacles. And don't worry, you'll know. In fact, you're not even going to need the sun. I forgot to emphasize that. There will be no need for the sun, the moon, the stars. At night, it will be bright. Amazing. I used to think that was just an old gospel adage, tale. But it's biblical. Jesus himself will be the light. In fact, Revelation, John picks up on that in Revelation. I meant to go to this one. Revelation 21. Oh boy. See if we can find it. No, maybe it's 22. No, it's 21, 23. So chapter 21, verse 23. Speaking of the New Jerusalem. Interesting, it's going to be called the New Jerusalem. Ever wonder why? So, Revelation 21, verse 23. And the city, the New Jerusalem, had no need of the sun, neither of the moon, to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it. And the Lamb is the light thereof. Question, who is the Lamb? Jesus Christ. Jesus is the light that we're going to need. And one day it's going to be physically. He will be the sun. He will be the stars. He will be the moon. And just as it said there at the very end, there will be no Canaanite. What did the Canaanite do? They worshipped the moon, worshipped the sun, worshipped the stars. We've got some Canaanites here in our own nation that worship the stars, worship the sun, look to the moon, look to all of these idols and trinkets and things. One day, again, we're all going to come together and worship. Year after year, commemorating. It's amazing. He's still going to release Satan after all that time, and people will not choose to come? You better believe it. Look around. Does everyone in America go to church? Does everyone in America worship God? So too, that time, even though it's going to be an amazing time, there will be no need for the sun. Jesus himself will be the light. And we've read about this millennial kingdom so much that it's hard to imagine, really. But there will be no death. There will be nothing to fear. Yet, still those that will be born during that time that will choose kind of Satan. They'll just choose to believe the lie. They'll choose to go along with what their feelings tell them. And who knows what Satan will do, what he's always been doing. Did God really say? Constantly coming at people with different things. But Jesus is, he's not only the bread of life, he's not only the light, as we've referred to, he's also the living water, which will feed everything. In fact, Ezekiel's whole picture of the temple, the millennial temple, where the river of life flows through it, it's Jesus giving life, bringing things to life. Like he does to us. When we partake of his body, it gives us life. When we eat of his flesh, when we drink of his blood. My wife, teaching the women's study on Wednesday nights, just went through this, where Jesus talks about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. You know what happens? John 6:6. I don't know if you guys got all the way to that yet. But always remember that verse, because John 6:66 says, from that time on, they didn't follow him anymore. They said, that's too much. I'm sorry, I can't go that far. To eat your body and drink your blood? You're wacko. But we know now, just as when he stood and said, if any man thirst, drink of me, and you'll never thirst again. What is he talking about? Physically? No. That's why people misunderstood him so much. John, Nicodemus, earlier in the Gospel of John, coming to him and saying, what must I do? I want to be saved. I want to go to heaven. Starts talking about being born again. And of course, go back to my mom's womb. What are you talking about? And people have this